This is Doc with Doc and Lefty. Thanks for joining us again. We're here every Tuesday from 6 to 7 p.m. We have the split screen today, and Blake's over here going, oh my goodness.
I don't know how to work this 21st century technology.
Oh, yeah. Well, it looks like you're working it pretty good. And you're
all right.
You're a musician, too. And
hey, I can play the instruments. I don't know anything how to record them.
Oh, is that it? All
yeah.
Right. How you been?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Well, let's just talk about the elephant in the room. This shooting that happened in Connecticut sucks. And that's the only word for it.
Yep.
And there's nobody has any answers. No answers at all.
Nope.
And it's really just a tragedy. What I do know, this is what I know. There's been a hue and cry about banning assault weapons. And the problem is assault weapons have already been banned, the automatic ones. And you have to have they're not banned, but you have to have a license and you have to have
that lapsed in 04 though. That's what they're talking about.
Well, the assault
weapons ban lapsed in 2004.
But the automatic weapons, which is what everybody, on a lot of my Facebook friends keep talking about, they want to ban automatic assault weapons and all that. That isn't what was used here for the killings. And the problem is any gun that you buy, by definition, is to kill stuff, and you can have the purpose of the gun be a target gun, but you can still use a target gun to kill people. And
but I think the issue is less, we talked about this last week, and so I wasn't really anticipated talking about, but this happened in the interim. And so I think it's apropos. What people are really, really concerned about is body counts, and that's what they've been concerned about this entire time. And these oversight. I mean, there's nothing there. I don't think there's any reports that this was the weapon was modified at all or anything except what it was. But it was, these big clips that hold a lot of rounds. These extra magazines, no limitation on the kinds of ammunition that you can buy. Like that's the stuff that people are worried about. And what's really frustrating is we hear all of this about sensible gun regulation in this country and that we have good laws, we just need to enforce them better. Well, here's a case where the laws were followed to the letter, where this woman did everything that she possibly could do, and her weapons were still turned against her because her son wanted to carry out a particular act that ended her life and the life of 26 other people. And so what I think a lot of people are talking about now is, are we going to have to just get rid of this kind of stuff? We didn't talk about my own personal position on the Second Amendment and firearms and stuff last week, and I don't really, feel up to getting into a gigantic body slam about it. But I would be perfectly comfortable living in a country where you had legal access to weapons commonly used in hunting, where they, bolt action rifles, shotguns, like single shot or double barrel shotguns, where it was manual loading. These semi-automatic and automatic weapons. First of all, semi-automatic is really easy to change into an automatic weapon if you know what you're doing, and the internet is replete with that kind of stuff. But where reload time was slower, where the amount of ammunition you could pump out in a minute wasn't nearly as fast, I would be perfectly okay with that. Ban the manufacture, sale, and importation of all handguns except for law enforcement. Ban the sale, manufacture, importation of all semi-automatic, automatic weapons except for law enforcement. Law enforcement and the military have require that kind of those kind of firearms. Those are the people that should have them. Those are the people who are trained to use them. Those are the people who are trained to use them responsibly. Now, if you want to go target shoot, if you want to use a big gun at a target at a range, or a handgun in a range, then there can be maybe an exception or a permit that those range operators can have. They can provide guns for people to come. I just don't feel. I feel like the cheap availability of all these really like easily accessible high body count weaponry, that's the problem. We talk about, I saw a picture on Facebook about the gun That's one of the problems. There's a lot of problems. I mean,
there are a lot of problems.
There are a lot of problems. That's one small problem. I saw a picture on Facebook of a criminal, like gun control, crime and gun control. If you saw that picture where the criminal's pointing a gun and what gun control people are pointing their fingers at the guy who's got the gun, holding the gun on him, and that's really not realistic in the sense that gun control people don't want folks to get hurt. But if the guy with the handgun, the criminal with the handgun, didn't have the handgun.
But by definition, the guy with the handgun,
if he couldn't get access to it.
Well, but how are you going to prevent access? I mean, that's kind of like
ask
closing
Scotland,
the door.
Ask Finland. Ask all these folks that have really, really restrictive gun manufacturing importation laws that if you make the guns too expensive to get, these criminals that traffic in gun running, it's a business to them. They don't care, about guns getting in the hands of a teenager.
And I get that. So the problem is, there's still gun violence in Scotland. There's still gun violence
not as much as there is here
in Finland.
Not even close.
But part of that is culture. I mean, you have. I always go back to this. It's like trying to make dirt. I mean, when you're trying to make dirt, it seems simple on the outside, but you can't limit it to just one thing.
Well,
they keep talking.
No one's talking about limiting anything. It's got to be a comprehensive strategy.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have. I mean. Here's the thing. Everybody's talking about how Scotland banned guns after this big school shooting that they had in 1996. And they haven't had a gun shooting in a school in 16 years. What they're not pointing out is the 30 years before that, they hadn't had a school shooting either. I mean, what do you make of that? They had just the same laws up to that shooting, and there wasn't a single episode of gun violence.
Their gun violence is down. They don't have nearly the kind of killings with guns that we do. And there's also, if you look,
our gun violence is down too. I mean, our level. It's here. I have it on Facebook, but our actual level of violence, gun violence, is actually down over the last 20 years.
It's still really, really smart. All I'm saying is that we talked last week about instances of where heavy restrictive laws on firearms didn't have any sort of noticeable effect on gun violence. And I actually went back and looked at the a graph on gun control policy around the country, and states where guns are more heavily restricted. There's no causation. It's not the numbers are not statistically causally linked, but there's a definite correlation where when especially guns in the North, where there are restrictions on these gun shows, private sale, background checks, all those things that NRA members think is okay, that gun owners who don't carry the NRA cards think are okay, all these different restrictions that place on gun owners, where those gun shows and private sales aren't as big of a deal and those restrictions are tighter, there's less instance of gun-related violence. Now, we don't know what that means because it's almost a cultural thing, obviously.
Yes.
And that's also the biggest problem. I think that the left has a really hard time, and maybe they do it on purpose, I don't know, but they have a really hard time talking about this because I think that you only hear people talking about gun control who are guys like Michael Bloomberg, these rich urban guys who the rest of the country does not see as having any kind of authority or legitimacy. You're not going to take my gun. And that's what it sounds like. And I'm not blaming the folks on the gun folks or however you want to categorize them. I'm not blaming them for feeling apprehensive because that's all they hear. And that's what it sounds like to them.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in today. We are going to be back here in 1 minute. Frank, our producer, will get busy with a great commercial that will allow our station to continue to operate. Listening to Doc and Lefty on webcast1live.com. Think we'll be back in a minute.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
It's like they want to get hit.
Need a body shop?
Minor Wreck Express saves you time and money.
Hey, welcome back. This is Doc and Lefty. I'm Lefty, and Doc is over there. I had an interesting idea about a point that I wanted to lean into the next segment, where Doc is gonna, sort of take the show back a little bit. But because we were talking over the break about how random this all seemed, and I think that's really what the sort of more pro gun control folks really have the biggest problem in their heads, like wrapping their heads around, because no one really has any answers. No one can really understand, and the only way that they can think of how this could have been prevented is you take away the tools. If you can't do anything to if you can't do anything to control the mind, if you can't do anything to treat the illness, the psychological illness that this kid was suffering from, if you can't do anything to make mom get him treatment, then you take the tools away. It's like making sure that if you're too drunk to drive, you don't get a car. And so I think that's really where their biggest issue is. And the problem with that sort of tunnel vision, that sort of they're so desperate for an answer that they're grabbing onto one thing, is that they're ignoring very important things that can help, like mental health care. And I think that Doc can really speak to that, and what could have been done maybe to prevent greater access and things of that nature.
Well, that is one issue that is really missing in this debate, is what are the causal things that led up to this terrible tragedy. And the bottom line is this lady apparently had enough money that she could have accessed mental health services, and apparently didn't, at least according to the initial reports. There is obviously something wrong with this child. He had to be homeschooled. People thought he might have had Asperger's. All kinds of things could have been going on, but she didn't choose to access the mental health services. The other thing is, Dylan and Klebold, the two people responsible for Columbine, had seen psychiatrists. Several of these mass shooters had seen psychiatrists. In fact, one of the worst names in our history, Charles Manson, had been in residential placement in the 60s. The problem really comes down to, in a free society, how do you control this? In any society, how do you control this? And you can't. This is something that is beyond control. What you have to do is criminalize the behavior. But what we see now, especially, there's some universal truths to everybody who's done these kind of things, at least since the 1950s, going back at least that far. And the one commonality they have is dad is absent somehow in the home. Now, you can blame whatever you want to blame. You can blame Lyndon Johnson and the welfare people. You can blame society and blame MTV. You can blame, Keeping Up with the Joneses. It doesn't matter. Dad is gone somehow. And if dad is gone for too long, you can't recover these kids very well. It's then up to them to parent themselves. That isn't successful. And it appears that is what has been going on here with this case. I know in Dylan and Klebold, it was that kind of situation. There's a school shooting in West Virginia several years ago by a 13-year-old, same situation. Jeffrey Dahmer is a great example of that. Even though apparently his dad was still around, his dad did not make himself available like he should have.
Well, but I'm going to kind of break in if we're going to lump in. And maybe this is what we're going to talk about today, which is a bummer around this time of year.
It is. We wanted to have a nice show,
but there's just too much bad stuff happening. Yes. But if you're going to lump in school shooting with sort of like the garden variety, if there is such a thing of killer personality, like your Dahmers or your Bundys or your Gacy's or anything like those folks, one of the common factors is not necessarily that the father was absent, but that there was profound abuse from the father or the father's family, or just neglect on the mother's side. It seems like the fathers in a lot of these situations, like that was what was wrong with. That's what happened with Bundy. Yeah. Dad was gone, and then I think his dad's parents, his grandparents, like he had profound abuse from one of his either his dad or his grandparents. And so, and neglect from his mother. And so that was a lot of the rage against women that he had, was because mother neglected him, and then women rejected him.
Absolutely.
And so it seems like moms a lot of the time, and not to blame one parent or another, but that a pattern is neglect from mom, abuse from dad, leads to this sort of social isolation that these kids feel, even if they're charming and pleasant enough to be around.
Absolutely. Now, and that's absolutely correct. But they don't necessarily have to suffer from abuse. Jeffrey Dahmer will tell you straight out, he had a decent childhood, wasn't abused, but his dad wasn't present and his mom was weak somehow. It really depends on how these people perceive this. And what they reported on Fox News, which I haven't seen reported anywhere else, but on Fox News they reported that he was afraid he was going to be sent off. And that's what the trigger was against his mom. I could tell you when no
one else is saying that. Even the police aren't really saying that. So that's...
Well, but I can tell you, I knew this weekend, as soon as I discovered that his mom had been shot first, that there was something that had happened with his mom that triggered him to do this. And kids like this in this situation, at that point understand that their life is over. We call it fatal ground. They put themselves on fatal ground where now they have to move forward. They only have a limited amount of time and to leave their mark on the world, and they're going to leave it in the biggest way possible. And in this case, I think this kid panicked, grabbed the guns, and went to the school that he knew where his mom was a teacher.
She wasn't, though. That's
not a full-time teacher.
No, she had no connection to that school whatsoever. That was a misreporting from earlier in the week. He had absolutely no connection to that school at all.
But was she
no?
She wasn't a teacher at all.
She wasn't a teacher. She didn't work. She wasn't a teacher. She wasn't associated. She didn't volunteer at that school.
So that part's out, but
that makes it even more difficult.
Well, yeah, it does. It makes it more difficult to understand. But there was a trigger, and the second point that is whatever happened. He's trying to strike back at his mother. Maybe that's not what it was at this point. But the bottom line is he then went to where he had gotten hung up in his emotional development. It was one of those two things.
Do you think that it was that he had the sort of the cognitive, and everyone says that he was really smart. Like
Sure.
all the people that knew him said that he was really, really smart, but just kind of awkward.
Sure.
Do you think that he went for the easiest target? Was he? Do you think that he was that sort of sociopathic to kind of think that way, given everything else that he did?
Well, and that's entirely possible. I know with the Batman shooter, he did go to the easiest target. He bypassed theaters that did allow you to carry weapons into the theater, to one that specifically banned weapons. So the theory really is on the Batman shooter that he did pick the easiest target. This could be the same thing. I personally think from a psychiatric viewpoint, he picked the target that he had the most conflict with. And I would like to see when the parents were divorced, because I'm guessing it's going to be around 5 or 6 years of age, but I don't have that information. What I do know is it's a tragedy. Even if, people keep talking about, well, you need more access to mental health services. Amen to that. But the problem is she had all the money in the world to be able to access those services and didn't. Mm-hmm. And it's really a heartbreaker. What do you do? And now after the break, we're going to come back. We're going to give you some stats to really kind of try to help put this in perspective and to try to help our nation heal this divide that we're having over this gun policy debate. We'll be back in a minute. Frank's going to take us out. You're listening to Doc and Lefty on webcast1live.com. Remember, we are on Facebook. At some point, we'll have a Twitter. Hopefully, by the end of the holiday season, we'll have a website. We'll return in 1 minute. Thank you.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
If Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of America was your personal webmaster, Tom would filter out all bad debt emails. If Tom was your mailman, you'd never get any debt reduction junk mail. If Tom Coates was a lineman, he'd block any phone calls offering to reduce your credit card debt.
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America, and we're still your best choice for credit counseling. We're local, we're accountable, and we can do more. You make the call when the time's right for you.
When it comes to competition, there really is none for Consumer Credit of America.
We are back. This is Doc with Doc and Lefty. We are here on webcast1live.com. Thanks for joining us. One of the interesting statistics that I put together today, sometimes I have patients not show up, so I had a new patient not show up, so I had a whole hour to kill. And I was out there researching how many actual deaths happen at school and are school related. And I came up with this interesting number. And that is, there are just about 400 kids that have died in the latest cohort that graduated this last year in 2012. And out of those 400 people, somewhere around there, that died, about 160 were from shootings. Now, I mean, and that includes, like, you go to school with a gun, shoot yourself in the head, that would be included. So if you add up all the kids that went through the school system in this cohort, K through 12, you have about 50 million children. That is a rate, that is a rate that is far lower than your chance of getting hit by lightning, than winning the lottery, anything like that. You're far safer sitting at school than you are even sitting at home going down the road. And, and I'm not trying to say that these lives weren't important. They're very important. It's awful. I mean, these kids had so much potential. I mean, they're talking about kids that overcame a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. So I'm not trying to minimize it, but I am trying to reassure people that schools are not dangerous places. And that's my point about that particular statistic.
Well, I think that's a good sentiment, because we certainly don't want schools to all of a sudden get even worse rap than they've had over the last 25 years. But I remember making a very similar point right after 9/11, and where the chances of you being involved in of anybody being involved in a terrorist hijacking of a plane are very, very remote. The most popular, and I had the same thought, I just wasn't smart enough to express it the way that this person did. The big popular Facebook meme after this happened was, one guy almost blows his shoes up on a plane, and now we have to take everyone has to take their shoes off before getting on a plane. 31 school shootings since Columbine, and nothing has changed in gun policy in this country. And I think that's a really fair point. I think that maybe, and this is where you and I are probably going to agree, the sentiment is correct. The constant sort of drumbeat of we can't talk about it, we got to grieve, now is not the time, so on and so forth. That's just nonsense to me, because we should have been talking about it years and years ago. We should have been trying to do something responsible. And this goes past party. It goes past even the whole pro-Second Amendment, anti-Second Amendment gun control debate. It transcends all of that, because really both sides have the same goal in mind: save lives, prevent these things, get people the help they need. And it comes down to the policy, which is what you and I always say, that we really agree on most principles, but how you get there is the problem. And so when you say that school shootings, that it's but every violent act, is, and we live in we constantly we live in a violent world, we live in a violent country, but in the totality, most people aren't violent. And maybe that's the positive to take out of today's show, is that violent acts comprise, out of the entire human experience, a very small, very minuscule part. Unfortunately, they have a gigantic, oversized impact.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. Now, it comes down to statistics. Now, my response to, one of my friends put up that very meme.
Yeah.
And my response to that just shows you how dumb TSA is, right? Why? why have that kind of knee-jerk response? I mean, it doesn't do
But the
you any
Republicans
good.
were all for it, and that's the thing. The conservatives were all for it when it was their guy pushing the policy back in 2001.
Not about I
remember.
I'm not trying to disagree with you, but I hate being put in a position where I have to defend George Bush, and know that.
I know, I understand that, but
it's ridiculous. You can't. It's a failure of our policy leadership. There's a bigger and bigger divide between you and me.
Mm-hmm.
And it shouldn't be that way.
No, it shouldn't be that way.
We're all Americans. We all want our kids safe.
Yep.
No,
I agree with you. I just remember being a liberal over those 5 years between 2001 and 2006 when the surge in Iraq first started. And I remember being the person saying, hey, you know what? Do we really need to crack down on the TSA and do all this kind of stuff? I mean, isn't that kind of what the terrorists want? I remember, not me personally, but I remember that sentiment being called unpatriotic, that we weren't honoring the victims of 9/11. I remember all of that. And so now when the tables have kind of turned, when it's a more, and you're hearing liberals do it too. Like, all these gun-toting conservatives don't care about kids, which is absolutely asinine and really offensive to a guy who is friends with a really committed conservative person who does more work with kids than these gun control nuts will probably see in a lifetime. And so, while I defend you on that particular point, I do feel it's necessary to put it in perspective that we talk about how the issue shouldn't be politicized. They're already politicized. They were politicized when Ronald Reagan got shot by John Hinckley. It just, and that's the reality.
And that's the part where you and I agree. We have a failure of leadership, and it hasn't been just with Obama, just with Clinton. It's been an entire range of Democratic presidents. I'm kidding about that, but the bottom line is we have a failure of leadership in our country. It should be fairly easy and fairly obvious that something really different needs to happen. Where can you take these kids? These teachers had to shield these kids with their bodies. That shouldn't be it. He had to shoot his way through a door. They should tell somebody, we need to get the kids to a safe room. There's not a safe room in a school for anything. I remember when I grew up, I don't know if you had to do this, but we had to hide underneath our desk in case there was a nuclear bomb go off. That's what we're supposed to do. Why not have a bomb shelter under the school? Why not have that? This is part of, and this goes into an entirely different direction, but we spend more on kids per capita, but we're not getting any results. And our schools are antiquated, absolutely antiquated. And I, as a conservative, would like to call on my conservative friends to go, listen, let's have a measure where we start building common sense things. If you go into a school, you have sprinklers, fire retardant material, all kinds of stuff, and an escape plan.
Yep, for fire.
Or
a bomb threat, even.
And
how many school bombings have you heard of in the last 25? They have a plan, and
there's been several attempted.
Yeah, or threatened. We don't know if they've actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and to be fair to these administrators, there are gunman policies that most of these schools. I know that my high school, and I was in high school before Columbine happened.
Yes,
and that was in fact April 2099. So that was my junior year, the spring of my junior year of high school. My school even before that had like a gunman policy.
Yeah.
And so it was, these schools, they do what they can and they try and do the best they can. I really do believe, but I think that you're right. And maybe the conversation needs to, if it's going to encompass, if gun control is only one piece or gun legislation is one piece, and mental health legislation is one piece, and enforcement, and that's the big thing. I know conservatives, the big bone that conservatives say is we got to enforce these laws better, or just try and work something out with the enforcement of them better. If that's one piece, what about school safety? And what about funding for schools? And what about maybe upgrading? If you say that the school system is antiquated, isn't the funding of schools through property taxes kind of antiquated nowadays?
Absolutely. Now, we're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll start talking about Lefties and I plan to make our schools safe. mainly by keeping Lefty out of the schools.
I am creepy.
Yes. So we'll be back. You're listening to us on webcast1live.com. We're here every Tuesday from 6 to 7 p.m. Apparently, we're going to have a big commercial now, right? Great. See you back in 3 minutes.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershide.
I'm administrative manager.
I'm the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
You know, if we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, you know, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be, it's your home.
You know, it's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're going to do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's going to be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're going to do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed rider it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you going to say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're going to be listening. They're going to want to know what your challenges are. Then they're going to come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you know, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me. But is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going, though. I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm going to take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed rider, it's free or 100% money back.
Enough said.
This is Doc with Doc and Lefty. You're listening to us every Tuesday from 6 to 7 p.m. on webcast1live.com. Wish they'd shorten that name.
It's a mouthful.
It is.
It's a mouthful.
So we were talking about what Lefty and I would do in order to secure the safety of our schools. I'm going to let Lefty start out so I can pounce on him and get myself a couple of pows.
Well, but it's so much more than just safety. We were talking about updating the schools for the 21st century, and you know, there's lots of common sense things to do, but you know, you'll wonder a little bit, and this is where you'll jump in and get me. And I know that a lot of people are going to disagree. Even most liberals are going to disagree with what I'm about to kind of wade into. And this is just kind of food for thought. You'll wonder about how schools operate and how and the model that public schools operate on, and even private schools for the most part, is something that they've been using since the beginning of the 20th century. Local control. Locally designated school boards funded through property taxes. And in this day and age where more and more people aren't buying homes, are not contributing to the property tax value of a particular community, more and more people are in mass housing units where, sure, the owners of those units have property taxes, but not nearly as much as would be earned from single-family dwellings in a community. And a lot of those folks aren't bearing children and sending them to school anyway, so they're not contributing very much in direct taxation in the local or the state coffers. And you wonder to yourself, is there a different way to fund schools? Is there a different way to provide them with the resources that they need, rather than just this sort of really, I'm not going to say outdated, but I'm going to say old-fashioned system of property and local taxation. And everyone kicks and screams because they don't want the federal government to come in. They don't want the states to come in and dictate how they educate their kids. And I'm sensitive to that. I think that local culture is one of the biggest educators of kids that there can be, and local culture infusing a school is a lot more valuable than, say, a homogenous federal system. But you gotta wonder if schools like in Sandy Hook and for all, it's in Connecticut, so for all intents and purposes, it was a really well-funded, well-resourced school.
Yes.
But if other schools were, and a lot of this kind of stuff goes down, had things like safe rooms, or had maybe classrooms with more bullet-resistant door paneling or windows, things like those seem like common sense measures that if you have a kid come into the school and he shoots the guy at the counter, the whole thing, maybe an automatic alarm system, like the whole place goes into lockdown and he's trapped in that area. Sure,
Yep.
You have one guy that got hurt, but you see it in government buildings and military establishments all the time. We don't want to really compare an elementary school to a military establishment, but I think that there's the common sense things that can happen.
Yeah, but it's just smart. One of the things that kills me is that these schools have higher security guards, yet they don't have any weapons. That's like, back to the firefighter thing. Mm-hmm. It's like firefighter shows up, but you don't have any water.
Do you think
if you're going to have a guard, it has to be an armed guard. I believe that's what you need to have. Either you need to have police patrolling the hallways, which we do in some of the schools here in Des Moines, or you're going to have to hire a person with an armed guard. There's a lot of rules that really are problematic in order to be able to defend the school.
But those armed guards and the police presence at schools is more to protect the kids from themselves rather than an external force coming in. They're not looking outside. They're policing the hallways because of violence between students.
Yeah, and I understand that. I understand that very well. But the problem is you still have to be able to respond to external threats. One of the rules that I know that they have in the school is that the doors have to open outward from the classroom because it might be a fire.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how are you going to barricade that room if there's a shooter? So there are things like that have to be considered. One of the things that I do know, because there was a meme about, how many, if by the time the police respond, so many died and it's so much less if somebody has a gun there. I started thinking, I'm a conservative. I wanted to believe it, but being me, I thought, well, that can't be right. Turns out that the statistic is true, and even more true is if you actually look up how many shootings and crimes occur on schools where the perpetrator, before he could really get rolling, was killed, really far outweigh anything like Sandy Hook or Columbine. Most of the time, these things are stopped either by the police or by an armed citizen. One of the things that everybody skips over in these things, without exception to this point, when the shooter has gone into the school, when confronted with somebody with a weapon, either do commit suicide or attempt to commit suicide. There's only been a couple that have survived, their suicide attempt. One is in a coma in Germany. He did it in Germany. The other one intended to, had a misfire, and didn't manage to do that. Those were the cases I looked up. So each and every one of these people, had they been confronted with a weapon, let's say at the door, or, he starts firing down the hallway, mm-hmm. If he's confronted with a weapon, almost always, in fact, every time so far, they turn and they try to kill themselves. And that goes back to the mentality of these shooters, is that they want to go out. They're on fatal ground, and they have no interest in continuing their life after this big spree.
Well, but see, if they kill themselves and they're confronted with a weapon, doesn't that sort of I feel like countervails the point that you make that are going to make as big of an impact as possible. Killing yourself in front of a cop, the cop's seen that kind of stuff before. Here's my question to you.
But they're not thinking that way.
Here's my question to you.
Yeah.
A lot of these kids, and I think I kind of I'm not going to argue with you about the psychiatry of it, obviously, but I am going to take an issue with it. Don't you think that if these kids are going to committed school shooting. This guy was 20 years old. He wasn't a kid anymore.
No,
you know, he had maybe the mentality of a younger person, but he was really, really smart. And this had sort of the more impulsive actions to it. But don't you think that that the Columbine shooters who planned it out meticulously would take into account whether or not their school had armed guards, and those aren't? And I feel like, you've been hearing a lot about administrators and teachers having guns in the school. You arm the administrators because they're the first line of defense,
I think,
and you train them. That makes them targets to me. You have
it does, but everybody in that school's a target.
That makes them the first targets. I mean, it's the exact same sort of idea. If you have these administrators and the teachers who are in charge of the safety of the kids, who have the weapons, and they're the ones who are going to make the defense, you would think, then that also makes them the first to go out. And so those kids then are leaderless. It's just, if you're thinking about it in a wartime, you don't put your general on the front line.
Well, and I agree, and I agree. I believe there's an administrator that can handle the ability to learn and train with a weapon, or a lot of the administrators I know are former military, so they can handle a weapon. One of the things that people skip over with Dillon and Klebold is they had that entire building rigged to blow up, and it's the fact that they screwed up the bombs. Mm-hmm. They were waiting for people on the outside. Them charging
they wanted
in,
first responders too.
Yeah, when they went charging in was a change of plan. And I firmly believe that at that point, had somebody confronted them with a weapon, there might have been a shootout right there, but I'm pretty sure that they would have killed themselves right there, knowing that they had failed.
No, because I just disagree. From what from all the books that have been written about that shooting, and from all from the profile about Klebold, who was sort of the ringleader, and the dominant personality in their duo, he was too full of himself. But
he had a plan and he had a follower. And I get where you're coming from. We're kind of off how we're going to make schools safe. So we agree. Let's go back.
Yeah.
So let's line it up. 1, we have to have a safe room. 2, just like you can have a fire retardant bulletproof wall. You can have that.
Yep.
3, figure out a different way to secure the doors. 4,
have a lockdown system in the entryways.
Yes.
You can still have free access to the school, kids coming in, coming out, but are you telling me that a bank can have bulletproof glass to keep them, so that if a shooter comes up and points a gun at him, and they can hit a silent alarm and the cops can be there in 8 seconds, that a school can't have the same sort of thing? Are you telling me? I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think that I'm going to call on my folks and your folks, and I hope you'll support me with this. 1, don't politicize the fact that we need to upgrade our schools infrastructure. I don't want my people going, oh, well, geez, we don't have the money, we need to economize. This is an issue of safety, shouldn't be subject to debate. And 2, I don't want the lefties getting all bent out of shape because, geez, they want more money for the unions. All right? I think we can both agree on that these are separate issues. Teachers' unions are one issue. Fiscal responsibility is another issue. Mm-hmm. I think we can both call on it just to say we need to come up with some money to give these kids.
And I think and going back to what I led the segment off with, I think restructuring the way that schools are funded across the board is one step in that direction. Do I have any sort of idea on how one would do that? Of course not. But I'm just a think tank.
But we can talk about it. We're going to be right back after the commercial. We are going to talk about something fun. We're going to talk about Christmas traditions.
That's a good one.
Because it's Christmas next week. And whether you want to whether you do Kwanzaa or Ramadan or, Hanukkah, we all celebrate at this time of the year in order to, for whatever reason. We like it. Except for the atheists. I don't know what they, celebrate except a day off. So we'll be back in just about a minute. You're listening to Doc and Lefty on webcast1live.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
It's like they want to get hit.
Need a body shop?
Minor Wreck Express saves you time and money.
This is Doc with Doc and Lefty. You're joining us on webcast1live.com. We're here every Tuesday from 6 to 7 p.m. Plus, we're on YouTube. Did you know that?
I did know that.
All right. I was kind of having a little, it wasn't really an argument, but, kind of a, that damn microchip thing keeps coming up. And I got a friend of mine whose husband always likes to, apparently he doesn't have anything good to say, so he just throws in, how about microchipping the dog? So I finally referred him to YouTube, so hopefully he saw our first show back. But we're going to talk about Christmas traditions. Kick us off. What was your favorite Christmas memory?
Well, my Christmas traditions nowadays are a little bit more in flux because my parents moved to Minneapolis, and so, and did so after I had moved out of the house. Any other times we'd moved, it was before I graduated high school, and so the traditions are a little bit different. But when growing up, the thing that was, and also, my grandparents were kind of spread out in South Dakota. We lived a long ways away from them, so we weren't always able to see them every single year. So we had kind of a three-way tradition thing that we would do. If we were staying home, because my mom had to work, she's a lab tech, and she would be on call a lot, so she would have to go in on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. And so if she had to work over Christmas, then we'd stay home. And if we stayed home, and it was just the four of us, my sister, my parents, and I, what we would do is my dad, who is one of those sort of dump it all in cooks, would get some sort of like foreign traditional recipe, or German, Norwegian, English, some sort of traditional Christmas meal of one of those ethnicities, and make it for us. And then we'd eat, and then my sister and I would go and stare at our presents while the parents took forever cleaning up. And then we'd all sit down and we'd open presents. My mom would put on some sort of Mannheim Steamroller CD or some other kind of standard Christmas music, and we just do that, stay up way too late, not help pick up, and then my parents are getting really angry with us, well, me, and then we go to bed, get up really early in the morning, and play with our toys. That was sort of the main Christmas tradition. Of course, if we traveled with the grandparents, then it was a completely different thing. But that meal was what I remember most from growing up, is that my dad would always make something fantastic, and it would always be something that had to do with our heritage from where our grandparents and great-grandparents grew up.
Well, that's pretty fantastic. What we would do when I was a kid is we would, of course, we're Catholic midnight mass and the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dad, who always liked to fancy himself some kind of deacon in the church or something, although he wasn't, he would sit there and we would get together, we'd have dinner and everything else. And of course, we'd have to leave at 11 o'clock in order to get a seat. Well, it didn't matter what we did. Dad was never on time. So we'd roll in there at 12:10. Of course, no place to park. Dad would march right down the middle of the aisle, right, just straight down, and we'd all have to sit in the very front row. And that's where the choir was sitting. And of course, we'd show up when the choir was singing, and we'd be sitting there. And then, the choir was nice enough to go, well, all right, you can sit there. And then finally, my mom put her foot down. So now the Christmas tradition was we had to go to the church at 10:30 at night, sit there for an hour and a half, and then sit there for another 2 hours during midnight mass.
Wow.
Oh, I know. It's a killer, especially for a kid. So then that brought on the little Pat, me being me, tradition of going down, sneaking into the liquor cabinet, nipping off a couple before I went so I could sleep in a bench. So that was my very tradition. And then when we grew up and we started having our own families, our tradition is the night before we have a seafood breakfast, and then the next day we have a traditional meal. And we don't give we don't give presents to each other. We all kind of sat down and decided that, in order to keep our hearts full of Christ throughout the year, if you really need something, just come ask. We'll get it for you, whatever you need. Otherwise, we're not going to exchange presents on that day.
And and I really think that's a really cool idea. My family over the last several years, and I don't know when I really kind of started feeling this way. I think I've always kind of been a little bit this way, where my mom gets really sort of frustrated with me because, and my grandparents too, my mom's mom especially, get frustrated with me because I never really talk about anything that I want for Christmas ever. And the whole gift giving thing to me, while I understand the sentiment, I understand the tradition of it, and I appreciate it. And people, and I appreciate that I have people in my life that want to give me presents because they love me and they care about me. I completely understand and I appreciate that. I'm the type of guy, though, that I don't want anything for Christmas because I don't feel like I need anything of a Christmas gift type nature. That all that I really need in a Christmas tradition is to be with my friends or my family, depending on who I can be with that particular time of year, and that's enough for me. We can party, we can hang out, we can eat a really nice dinner, have a cocktail, and just talk and visit with each other because I don't see them very often. And the whole exchange of presents, I feel, gets in the way of that. And it moves the focus less from the fellowship of being with your family and more to seeing who got the best iPad. And that's really, I think that's been my attitude for a number of years, and it really irritates my mom because every single year it's, so Blake, what do you need for Christmas? I don't know. Nothing. I've already, everything that I want.
There for a while, you need a new car. The bubble car was
I took
awful.
care of that.
Yeah, I see that. I still can't believe somebody bought that POS.
Oh, it's fantastic. I was talking to my buddy the other last night about who bought it and why he bought it. Apparently, he just needs to drive to work, and it was almost a death trap. It was a really severe terminal illness trap. Yeah. But then when he brought it in, and they realized that all 4 brakes needed to be replaced, all the rotors needed to be replaced, and the back drums were shot. Yeah.
So he got himself a pretty good deal.
Yep. Oh well, the salvage was like $500.
No kid.
Yeah. They took it and traded for the parts.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, it's a classic now. They don't make those anymore.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that my ex-wife does that my kid still loves is the 12 days of Christmas. He gets this little calendar, and each one has like a little treat or something behind there.
It's an advent calendar.
What?
An advent calendar.
Is that it? Wow.
Yeah, you're talking about like where it starts December 1st and you go all the way to Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got a Bible verse and the whole thing. I was raised Lutheran, and Lutheran is just diet Catholicism.
Yes.
And so
yes, it is. Yep. So, all right. Well, that shows you exactly how much I was paying attention at Christmas. So anyway, she'll go out and she'll get him a nice one, right? Mm-hmm. And when he was a kid, he was pretty good about it. He would open it up and take one out, and he'd get all excited. He turned about 13, and he'd get one of those, and he'd go, "Yeah, that's great, Mom." And he would figure out how to slice out the treats all at one time at night. So he'd go, "Oh, yeah, that's great. Oh, yeah, that's great." So he gets another one, I think was a year or two ago, right? Mm-hmm. And he brings it home. He's got it sitting on top of his stuff, and it's all open. And I said, "Did you just get this tonight?" "Yeah." "Did you eat it all on the way back from your mom's?" "Oh, yeah, it's great." So our new tradition is just to skip all the rest of the month and just eat the rest of that. So
yep, I know that. See, when we were really little and we were living in Eastern Iowa, and my mom was more sort of attuned to her Lutheran heritage growing up. We had the Advent wreath, with the pink candle and the purple candles and the blue and the big white candle in the middle. We had the wreath that we did. And we had the Advent calendars from my aunts and uncles, and we had all that different stuff. And it's interesting because you hear about traditions, Christmas traditions especially, being so sacred to families, and the grandparents don't like to change, but they evolve and they grow and they do, and they have to accommodate different things. My sister just had a kid back in February, so this is his first Christmas. So now that gets added into it, and where once it was such a solemn, joyous, but yet very important. This is all about baby Jesus, and you really have to take it seriously. Now, we're leaving. Megan and I are leaving on the 22nd to drive up to Minneapolis for basically a cocktail party with all the relatives that live in Minneapolis, and it's gonna be fantastic because cocktail parties with my family are awesome.
Well, I'm glad.
They're awesome.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
All right, that sounds like a whole lot of fun.
What are you doing?
Well, I was waiting for my nephew to tell me if he was going to be taking Christmas off, because the tradition that we have here lately is we blow town for Christmas and New Year's. And we have a great time doing it. The first time we did it, the kids were, I think they were just either 17 or 18. And we went to Las Vegas, and we had this giant lobster meal and everything else. It was just a wonderful, wonderful time. And after that, we kind of have a tendency to leave. And last year we went to New Orleans, dragging this giant camper behind us, because I get stubborn sometimes. We should have just left the camper behind. And so I've been waiting to hear from my nephew, and it turns out they all want to stay home this year for Christmas. That's okay. So I'll probably be going over my brother Joe's and hanging out. My kid's been ragging my ear off about we all want to go to Uncle Joe's, and that'll be fun. My brother treats us pretty good. He usually has, these big fat lobsters he drops in the can and boils them up. I'll bring over, since I'm diabetic, I have a special meal that I make that's almost 0 carbs, yet you can have pie and ice cream and whipped cream, and I make my own whipped cream and all that, and everybody seems to love it. And so we're going to be having sugar-free pies, and I'll bring over, I do an all-meat stuffing that's really wonderful. What would you think? How about this? What would you think of this? Call me crazy. What do you think about developing a cookbook? You bring in some recipes. I'll bring in some recipes. We'll put it together.
Doc, I have a fantastic set of recipes that would go great in a cookbook.
All right. Well, we'll start doing that.
Well, and this is probably a good time, or as good a time as any, because next week is Christmas, so we won't be here.
Yeah, we won't be here the next 2 weeks, which I'm sure is breaking Frank's heart. He actually asked, do you guys want me to show up on Christmas? You doing a Christmas show? I said, absolutely. So you let the cat out of the bag. I was hoping he was just going to show up.
You got Bob Cratchit. You got Ebenezer Scrooge over sitting across the table. Man, I hope
it's just another excuse to pick a man's pocket.
God bless us, everyone.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, and you know what? This is something else I discovered about Frank. As people who know me know that I really do kind of have a foul mouth. And I try to really keep it under control. So I'm showing Frank some pictures of lovely young women, and not in anything that I would view as inappropriate. I thought he was going to have a stroke. Oh, I can't look at that. That would give me impure thoughts. And I'm like, dude, that's why you look. And so anyway, turns out he's truly lives the way he believes.
Yeah.
And for me, I was going to give him a lot of crap. But then when I discovered he really is living the way he believes, I respect that to death. I get tired of Christians who come up, slap me in the head with a Bible, and go, well, geez, you're a sinner. When I go, you're not living a life either.
Yeah, but you slapped me in the head just now. I'm pretty sure that both of those would be frowned upon. But
the what? I didn't slap you in the head, did I?
No. Saying if they slap you in the head with the Bible, they've already kind of violated some of that.
Well, I kind of like
that Christian sentiment.
Sometimes.
The last couple, if you can't tell, these last couple minutes, we kind of ran out of things to talk about. So the whole thing just operations went off the rails.
Well, you know what it was is that we were going to talk about some Christmas traditions around the world. So I did a quick Google search.
Yeah.
Here's what I found out. They pretty much do what the rest of us do. And that is, since we're all Christians, we all kind of have the same things. In Malaysia, they decorate a tree and go to church. All right, well, what do they do in Peru? They decorate a tree and go to church. Well, what do you do in Turkey? I mean, that's a Muslim country. They decorate a tree, go to church. I already know what they do in Russia. They decorate a tree and go to church. So I was like, all right, so what do they do in Mexico? So they have 2 pages of what they do in Mexico, and at the end, basically it's we decorate a tree, go to church. So apparently we're much more homogenous than what we think. Thanks everybody for tuning in to our show. We will see you all back in 3 weeks' time. Everybody have Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Ramadan. What's the other stuff? Happy Hanukkah. And if we've offended anybody, that's just too bad. Get over yourselves. Final words?
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
All right. Thanks a lot. See you in a couple of weeks.